Brilliance Audio presents Sorry I Missed You by Suzy Krause, performed by Amanda Ronconi. It was Maude's wedding day, and she looked awful in her dress. It bunched and sagged and pillowed and bulged. It washed her out while somehow also accentuating what was, in Maude's mind, her worst feature, her face. Richard wouldn't care. She knew this because she looked awful in everything, and he never cared, or even seemed to notice. He didn't really talk about how she looked, but he wasn't one of those skeezy older men who talked about how other women looked either. Instead, he laughed hard at her jokes, engaged her in enriching conversation, made her extravagant meals, and held her hand proudly in public. He absently played with her hair while they watched movies as though it were long and soft rather than short and wiry. He touched her face affectionately when he told her he loved her, and his eyes crinkled at the sides like he couldn't believe he was so lucky. When this happened, she always felt her eyes do the same thing. Maude smiled into the full-length mirror, aghast at all those lines. It was definitely harder to look good in fancy things when you were in your 60s. Not impossible, just harder than it was when you were 25. You could do all the squats you wanted, walk 10 miles every day, apply moisturizer with a fire hose. Didn't matter. You lived in your body, and it showed. For the first time in her life, Maude wished she'd gotten married in her early 20s. This dress was meant for that bride. But then she thought about the kind of man she would have chosen back then, and she laughed out loud and decided not to worry about her face or her bulging midsection and enjoy the fact that she was in actual mutual love. Maybe deciding not to worry was one of the few things that came easier when you were in your 60s. And so, gathering up her courage and multiple layers of tulle and satin, she boarded a bus to the park beside the courthouse downtown, where they were to meet their photographer before the ceremony. Richard's idea. The people on the bus stared at her curiously, and she smiled back, unbothered. Maybe they think I look beautiful, she thought. And before she could dismiss the notion, she put it on like another dress and wore it all the way to the park. The photographer was already there when she arrived, and he didn't notice her at first. He was taking pictures of a tree for some reason, circling it slowly like it was the bride, rotating the camera and fiddling with it, spinning the little dials, stopping every so often to frown with consternation at the sun, like he hadn't expected it to be out at 2 p.m. He wasn't a professional photographer, just a friend of Richard's who had always enjoyed taking pictures. This meant that his services were going to be cheap, and that was the most important thing. Maude and Richard's wedding album would not be passed down from generation to generation. It would merely sit on a coffee table for a few years until Maude and Richard were gone, and then someone would take the pictures out of it and throw them in the garbage, and the album, if it was lucky, would end up in a thrift store with a 25-cent sticker on it. This was Maude's first marriage, Richard's second, and neither of them had children. Their relationship wasn't the start of anything but itself. "Hi, Maude," said the photographer. "Hi," said Maude. She couldn't remember his name. "You look beautiful," said the photographer. "Liar," said Maude, laughing. "Take lots of pictures of us kissing and from behind. More of him than me. Maybe we could do a few of those funny ones where the bride holds her bouquet in front of her face." "Okay," said the photographer, looking uncomfortable. "Speaking of, why don't we start with some bridal portraits? I read that lots of brides like to have just a couple." "No, thank you," said Maude quickly. "None of just me." "Oh, okay. Sure, no problem. Sorry," said the photographer. He took another picture of the tree. "I'm just going to sit over there on that bench until my groom arrives," Maude said, giddy at the thought of Richard walking down the tree-lined path toward her, dressed in a suit, looking at her in that way he always did, like she was an angel and Jane Fonda and the only woman left on planet Earth. She arranged her pretty dress around her on the park bench and patted her hair and ran her ring fingers under her eyes to check for stray flecks of mascara. And then she sat. And sat. And sat. Until she began to wonder if she had misunderstood Richard when he'd said they should meet at this park. But the photographer was here. What were the chances they'd both gotten it wrong?